Imagine owning more money than entire countries, controlling global trade, influencing governments, having private armies, with the power to declare war, and then going bankrupt. A company had its own army, yes, and it still went broke. Stick around. This one's going to hurt. This company was worth more, adjusted for inflation, than Apple, Google, and Saudi Aramco combined. This is a company's money? Not a country's, same thing. Basically, that was the problem. This is the story of the Dutch East India Company, the VOC, founded in 1602. Dead by 1799. I'm listening. That's where this starts. Pepper. Nutmeg. Cloves. This started an empire. This exact thing. A pound of nutmeg in Europe sold for 60 times what it cost in Indonesia. Okay, that's actually a lot. The problem was getting it home alive. Pirates. Storms. Rivals. One bad voyage could ruin a merchant overnight. So 6 rival companies did something unusual. They merged. Cooperative, for greedy people. It wasn't kindness. It was strategy. Together, they couldn't be undercut. The first stock in human history. To fund it, they sold tiny pieces of ownership to anyone. Bakers. Widows. Shopkeepers.
So regular people could own a piece of this, for the first time in history. Yes, this idea, public shares, is the ancestor of every stock market alive today. Spice deal built modern capitalism. Power without limits. Company with its own army. This is a trading company. Why does it have warships? Because spices were worth fighting for. The Dutch government gave the VOC the legal right to build forts, mint coins, sign treaties, and wage war. That's a lot of power for a business. Stepping back from the canon. This is a trading company. Why does it have warships? Because spices were worth fighting for, and the VOC fought constantly to control the supply. Green, too big to compete with. In the Banda Islands, the only place on Earth where nutmeg grew, the VOC didn't negotiate trade deals. It took the islands by force. Entire local populations were killed or enslaved to control nutmeg production. This isn't a business story anymore. No, it's a power story. And that's the part most documentaries skip. The VOC became rich first, then it became something closer to a government, accountable to almost nobody. Peak VOC, 1670s. By the late 1600s, the VOC employed roughly 70,000 people. It operated over 150 trading ships. It paid annual dividends to shareholders of around 40%. 40%? Every year, for decades. Imagine an investment that pays you almost half your money back, annually, for 50 years straight. That's not a company. That's a machine humans hadn't built the rules for yet. Here's the irony. The VOC's success became its disease. The company was run by 17 directors, called, fittingly, the Lord's 17. They controlled an empire from offices thousands of miles from where the actual business happened. So the people making decisions never saw what was actually going on. Rarely, communication between Amsterdam and Asia took, on average, over a year. Round trip, decisions were made on outdated information constantly. The dividend trap. But here's the real hidden problem. Those huge 40% dividends shareholders loved, the company didn't always have the cash to pay them, so it borrowed. Debt is like borrowing water to stop a fire. It works, until the lender wants the water back. The VOC started paying dividends, using borrowed money, not profits. Loans. Wait. They were paying investors with debt, pretending it was profit, exactly. And for over a century, nobody outside the company really knew. Corruption at every level. Local VOC employees in Asia were notoriously underpaid. So many simply stole, smuggled goods, falsified records, sold company property privately. Historians estimate corruption drained the company for decades, quietly, before anyone in Amsterdam noticed the bleeding. This feels like a terrible idea. Nobody listened, because the dividends kept coming. And when the money keeps flowing, nobody asks where it's really coming from. The distance, by the late 1700s, the world had moved on. Britain's East India Company was leaner, more ruthless, more efficient. The VOC was still run like it was 1670, slow, bloated, arrogant. They're still acting rich, while everyone else gets stronger. Pride is expensive. The VOC found that out the hard way. The Fourth Anglo-Dutch War, 1780, then came the war that broke everything. The Dutch fought the British, and lost badly. VOC ships, the literal source of its wealth, were sunk or captured by the dozens. Trade routes, the company's entire reason for existing, were strangled. Where did all the ships go? The mascot asks quietly. Burned. Sunk. Gone, along with most of the company's remaining wealth. The debt becomes unfixable. By the 1780s, the VOC's debts had ballooned to roughly 219 million guilders. To put that in perspective, that's larger than the entire annual budget of the Dutch Republic itself. A single company owed more than its own country could spend in a year. How does a company owe more than its government? By pretending, for over 100 years, that the problem would fix itself. It never did. The collapse. 1796, the bailout. Eventually, the Dutch government did something almost unthinkable. It stepped in to take over VOC operations. The richest company in human history needed a government rescue to survive. The company became richer than governments, then it needed governments to save it. History has a strange sense of humor. 1799, the END. On December 31, 1799, the Dutch East India Company was formally dissolved. Its remaining debts and territories were absorbed by the Dutch government. The most valuable company that had ever existed ended not with an explosion, but with quiet paperwork. $197 years. Trillions in value. And it just ends like this. Most empires don't fall, they get quietly wound down by people cleaning up the mess. The lesson? The pattern repeats. Here's why this story still matters. The VOC didn't collapse because of one bad decision, it collapsed because of a pattern. Take on debt to maintain appearances. Reward short-term shareholders over long-term health. Ignore corruption while profits are high. Assume size equals safety. That doesn't just sound like the 1700s, no, it sounds like 2008. It sounds like every company that called itself too big to fail, right before it failed anyway. Too big to fail? Size isn't safety, it's just a slower way to fall. The VOC was the most powerful company that ever existed. It had ships, armies, currency, and centuries of dominance. None of it mattered once the debt came due. Money doesn't care who had it yesterday, only who understands it tomorrow. That's the real lesson here. Not spices, not ships, not empires. Power built on hidden debt always finds its way back to the surface. It just takes time. Because the next great collapse may already be happening, quietly, right now, in a boardroom nobody's watching. Will you notice it before it's too late?